And welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Sotah, pages 4 through 10, Daf Daled through Daf Yud. 4. Kol hamezalzel benetilat yadayim ne'ekar min ha'olam. Anyone who belittles the ritual of hand washing before a meal is uprooted from the world. What does it mean, mizalzel? Rashi explains, shochel tamid belo netilat yadayim. He regularly eats his meals, eats his bread, without first washing his hands. And why uprooted from the world? As Rashi explains, Ovel divrei chachamim chayav mitah. If a person flouts, violates regularly the words of the sages, they're deserving of death. Uparetz ger yishchanu nachash. And a person who breaches a fence of Judaism is bitten by the snake. Now, this is not necessarily taken so literally that anyone who violates even the slightest rabbinic prohibition is worthy of death. Rather, it's essentially a threat that people need to take the perceived to be lesser aspects of Judaism, namely rabbinic enactments, seriously, and not to be dismissive of them, rather to take them as halacha to be followed on a regular and consistent basis. Daf Hey 5. Come and see that the ways of God are not like the ways of man of flesh and blood. What is the way of basar vadam, flesh and blood? The prominent, the elite, they hang around with the elite. They pal around with those who are on the same social standing as they are. However, the elite do not socialize with the underclass. But God's ways are not that way at all. God is exalted, and yet God feels a kinship with those who are at the bottom of society, the shafal, the meek. Daf Vav, page 6. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ein zechut tola b'mayim hamarim. So there's a question among the Tanaim: does one's merit, a woman's merit, enable her to forestall the effects of the bitter waters of the Sotah, even in the event she's guilty? In other words, the punishment is supposed to happen, but it is delayed by way of some store of merit that the woman has. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says there's no delay. Why? Because if you were to say there's a delay, then you diminish the aura and the significance of the whole trial by ordeal in the eyes of women who are expected to drink. We want them to be intimidated by the whole procedure, to think that life and death hangs in the balance almost immediately. And what? If you tell me that there's a delay, they will not be as intimidated by this procedure. Moreover, tamotzi shemral taharot sheshatu. You could give a bad name to those who drank the waters already and who were in fact pure, who deserved to pass the test. Because what will people say about them? That actually they were tameot, they had been defiled, they were guilty, but they got lucky in the sense that some store of merit caused the delay of punishment. And we don't want people to say that about those who sincerely were innocent. Therefore, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says we reject the notion of the delayed punishment. Daf Zayin. Ketzad Osala. How does the husband proceed if he wants to have his wife go through the ordeal of the Sotah waters? He first has to bring her to the rabbinic court which exists in his jurisdiction. And the court in his locale will appoint 2 scholars to accompany him on his way with his wife to Jerusalem, and those 2 scholars who are accompanying them will be chaperones to make sure there is no intimate activity between the husband and wife on their way, because if there were such intimate activity, it would prevent the efficacy of the Sotah waters from taking place, and in fact she should not drink the waters at all under those conditions. Rabbi Yehuda, however, says, we trust the husband not to approach his wife in a physical way, because after all, he's angry with her and is bringing her to Jerusalem to have her undergo the trial by ordeal. So we can presume he's not going to sin in this respect, in this instance. Daf Chet, page 8. Tanu Rabbanan. We do not impose the Sotah waters on 2 women at the same time. Why? Because we're afraid what's going to happen. It could be that the first woman really was innocent, and she's going to stick to her guns and protest her innocence the whole way through and drink the waters. Okay, but what? The second woman is guilty, and she, having seen what the first woman did, to protest her innocence all the way to the end, this other woman, who in fact is guilty and should not be claiming innocence but should be confessing, will refrain from confessing and insist upon going through with the trial by ordeal. And that's a disaster, because we do not want her to fail the test. We'd rather her confess her sin in advance of taking the waters. Daf Tet, page 9. An Rabbanan. Sotah netnana b'misha ina roila. The Sotah cast her eye upon someone who was inappropriate for her, meaning another man, not her husband. Mashebiksha lo nitan la. What she wants, namely her paramour, the adulterer, is not given to her, because he's forbidden to be with her going forward forever. And what she had, meaning her husband, her lawful husband, is taken away from her in the sense that she can no longer be with him, having become a zonah, having defiled herself. Whoever casts his eye on that which isn't his, you don't get what you were hoping for, and that which you already had is taken away, and you're left with nothing. You're left not having what you wanted, and not having what you already possessed. Daf Yud. There were 5 people who were created in something of a heavenly image, in the sense that they excelled in one bodily respect more so than anybody else in the history of the world. However, laku behen, they all suffered their downfall in this special aspect of their physicality. What's that? Shimshon bekocho, Samson, Shimshon HaGibor, with his strength, his physical strength, ultimately was his undoing, and he knocked down the arena of the Philistines and died under the rubble. Shaul b'tzavaros, King Saul with his neck, in the sense that he was taller than everybody else, b'shichmo v'mala gavo mikol adam, and he died with an arrow or some war injury to the neck. Avshalom b'saro, Absalom, the son of David, the rebellious son, had the greatest hair, wonderful hair, but in the end he got caught the hair in the thicket, and that's how he was killed. Tzidkiyahu be'einav, Zedekiah, the last Judahite king before the destruction of the first temple, had great eyesight, but he was blinded, ultimately by the Babylonians. And Asa, King Asa, Baraglav, had great legs, feet, but in the end, he suffered an illness of his feet. Everyone have a great week. Chag kosher v'sameach to one and all.